Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Grant. I'm your host for this evening's webinar. I'm delighted to have Dave Wilton back. He's the first. Dave did a webinar for us more than a year ago. It was one of our most popular all-time webinars, and in a few minutes you'll find out why. He's a terrific presenter. David, thank you for doing this again.
Thanks for having me back on, Tim. I didn't realize I was your first repeat customer, so that's an honor for me as well. Thanks.
Absolutely. And welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to give you, particularly for those who are new, let me give you a quick sense of where we're going this evening. I say this evening because for Dave it's late afternoon in the West Coast. It's early evening here on the East Coast, and for those of you who are joining us from even further afield, again, a hearty, warm welcome. Again, for those who are new, let me give you a quick rundown of what we're going to do for the next 60 minutes. Dave will present for about 30 minutes, and then we'll take questions. But you don't need to wait until that point to ask a question or comment or let me know that you've got a technical difficulty. The place to do all three of those things is in the chat box in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. And if you look in the extreme bottom left-hand corner, you'll see the phrase main room. And to the right of that is a horizontal box into which you can type anything you want, but ideally in relation to a question or a comment that Dave makes or poses, and then hit enter on your keyboard, and that will propel your comment into the chat box for everyone to see. So feel free to do that at any time. But anyway, so without further ado, let me, if you're not familiar with Green Teacher, I'll just say this. We've been editing this quarterly magazine for youth educators for a little over 20 years now. And in the last 10 years, we have published these books, 6 books that you'll see in a moment on the screen. And like our magazine, the books share the best innovative strategies for working with kids, inside and outside of schools. And Dave, if you could just advance that next slide. Great. And so the other thing I'll just mention before introducing Dave is that at the end of the 60 minutes, will come a questionnaire, and a very short questionnaire. It takes about a minute and a half to answer it. And for all those who take the time to do so, we'll enter your name to win a free 1-year subscription to Green Teacher magazine. So I would encourage you to give us your feedback at the end of the session on what went well and what could have been better as well. So without further ado, though, let me introduce Dave Wilton. Some of you may have enjoyed his past webinar. And if you haven't, by the way, and you're a Green Teacher subscriber, you can access the archive version at any time via our website. But for those who don't know Dave, he's the Assistant Outreach Director for Facing the Future, which is a nonprofit organization. I call it a publishing machine in Seattle, Washington. Dave develops and conducts educator workshops and webinars. He oversees the organization's Peer Educator Network and supports its educator, community, and service learning outreach programs. He's presented over 100 workshops at conferences, schools, universities, zoos, and community events to teachers, pre-service and in-service teachers, and non-formal and community educators. And what I really found interesting, Dave, about your bio, the first time I saw it was not only are you a classroom teacher, that's not a big surprise, but you were also at one time a county land use planner, a bike mechanic, and had volunteered as a small claims court mediator. I have to say you have the broadest resume of any Green Teacher webinar presenter. Anyways, a hearty welcome.
For better, for worse, I do. Yes. Yeah, thank you, Tim. I had forgotten about some of those experiences in my previous lives as well. So let me, get things started. I would just want also a few things. I'm going to apologize in advance if you hear sirens or horns or traffic or yelling. We're in an office in downtown Seattle with relatively thin windows, and so you may hear any or all of the above. I just realized my slide font didn't quite work out there. But So there's that, and just thanks to all of you for joining us online right now, or for those of you who are tuning in later and watching an archived copy. I appreciate you all, your interest in Green Teacher and Facing the Future and what we have to offer, and appreciate that. And if you want to play along here, I've posed a question that I use in group settings a lot, and it's kind of fun to do in this format as well. So for those of you, if you want to play along at home, and like Tim mentioned, if you want to look at that prompt there, in 50 years, I think the world will be, and if you want to take a stab at typing in your 3-word answer, so it's a very short answer, just 3 words about how you think the world will be, give that a try. It's just kind of a way of framing the overall tone of what our organization is looking to do and support teachers doing, and what we'll be talking about in the next 30 minutes or so, and more if you have questions. So that's the first prompt, and let's see, one person said warmer. Okay, there we go. And closer, I'm seeing, and all right, transformed and environmentally literate. So good 3-word answers. So you can go ahead and keep going with those if you want. I'm going to pose a slightly different question now, which is, in 50 years, I want the world to be. And the idea behind asking that is, just by changing it up a little bit, is to think about how changing the question changes your answer. And also to kind of step back and think about, what perhaps maybe for you made that an engaging thing to think about. And if you're like me, we all have an opinion and ideas about what we think the world's going to be about, and we all care about the future because in some degree or another, either we are or somebody we know is going to be living in it and affected by it. And that's, if I can be not too optimistic, really what are the curriculum resources that Facing the Future creates, and the overall effort that we're trying to work towards with Education for Sustainability. And that's what we're going to talk about here today, about things you can do with your students to engage them, specifically in this point with literacy skills and social studies content, using sustainability as the lens for approaching these issues, because we think they're of interest and they're of relevance, and it's a good way to combine things in an interdisciplinary manner. So I like to share this quote here from Paul Hawken, which he gave at a commencement speech a couple of years ago at the University of Portland out here on the West Coast in Oregon. And I'm not going to belabor it by reading it through it, but if you want to read through it while I talk over it, feel free. And I like this quote because it's a nice way, I think, of capturing some of the kind of the angst and also the hope that is brought up by that thinking versus wanting future visioning activity that I just shared with you. And I like it because he's realistic in this. He's pragmatic in thinking about, if you look at the science and don't understand what's happening and aren't pessimistic, then you don't understand the data. But if you look at what people are doing and working towards, and you aren't optimistic, then you're probably not alive. And I think that's one of the challenges and the blessings of being an educator, is that these are the dilemmas that we're presented with, and it's the opportunities that we have also to really engage our students, not only with the academic content that we are expected to and want them to be able to walk out of our classrooms with, so they're prepared for, career and citizenship in the 21st century, but also, the issues that he talks about, big picture, and that we deal with in our curriculum resources are engaging and they're meaningful as well. So without further ado, I want to just give you a little bit of background about who we are as Facing the Future before, and I'm always curious if any of you who are here tonight, if you've heard of Facing the Future before, you can on that little smiley face down there, give a little thumbs up if you want to, or a thumbs down if you haven't heard of us before. I'm always curious what the reach of our organization is. But just briefly, who we are. We're a nonprofit. We're based on the west coast of the U.S. in Seattle and Washington State, and we're dedicated to creating tools for educators so that you can equip and motivate your students in developing critical thinking skills, and building global awareness, and looking at global issues through the lens of sustainability, and ideally engaging in positive solutions for a sustainable future. And so we do that by creating curriculum resources and professional development opportunities, and providing links to other resources on our website. And we offer these, via our website through venues like this that Tim has so graciously invited us into. And we do it through our curriculum resources, which are interdisciplinary. So they're used in science, environmental science, social studies, language arts, mathematics, the arts in all 50 U.S. states, and in all the Canadian provinces, I know, and in over 120 countries around the world. And we offer also, professional development workshops like this at conferences, primarily in the U.S. and North America, but also every now and then we're fortunate enough to get to go to a conference in Canada as well. and you can find us at our calendar also. And that's just our web address there, facingthefuture.org. So I know most of us here are familiar with the definition of sustainable development, and kind of before I launch into that, I just want to leave that slide up. And Tim, I realized I kind of failed to spell out the agenda overtly with a slide there. So I just want to kind of lay out the case for what we're going to talk about in case it's not evident. So we're going to be talking about literacy and social studies and sustainability in this context of two lessons that folks can download from our website, and they're free downloads from our site. And so at Facing the Future, while we base our materials on research and best practices, what we put out the door, I would say, is very practical. So I'm not going to be talking about literacy in the abstract theoretical sense, but more in the idea that, it's 4 p.m. or 7 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon evening, and my students just aren't getting this idea of cause and effect in my course, and how can I model it in a different way, in a different sense, so that they can get it. In that kind of actual classroom application sense is what we're going to be talking about, these aspects combined together. And so what you see there, that definition of what sustainable development is, since that's what we're going to be talking about, I think it's at least helpful to have a shared definition. It's by no means the only definition out there, but I like it because it's relatively succinct, and it was agreed upon by a large number of participating United Nations countries. So the definition itself comes from a document called Our Common Future, sometimes also known as the Brundtland Report. It was published in 1987. And it's probably one of the more commonly known definitions, but by no means the only one. And I'm curious if folks want to, I'll pause and just, if you could tell us two things when you chat in the box there is, where you're from, so the city or the state or the province that you're from, and if you want to add in also after that something that you're doing with literacy or social studies or both and sustainability. I would be curious to hear that. I know Tim would be as well, and it's also, I think, helpful for just everybody in the room, so to speak, to hear what's going on out there. So I will pose that question to folks, and you can type those in as you feel so inclined. And likewise, if there's a question that comes up, feel free to ask it in the box, and we can pause in a moment, or we can save it until the end if it seems more appropriate to do it that way. Alrighty, so there is the great three-ring Venn diagram of sustainability. I see we have one person here, it looks like, who's is working with future teachers with Education for Sustainability, which is great, and that's exciting for me to hear because we also do pre-service teacher education. So that slide that you see there is looking at the kind of the three main features of sustainability. So looking at society, economy, and environment. And the idea is that we're trying to meet our own needs without limiting the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And so we're concerned with balancing the impacts, both positive and negative, of those three pillars of environment, economy, and society. And the goal of sustainability is really to keep all of those houses in order by having a healthy economy, having a thriving society, along with a flourishing environment. So by balancing these, we're building a foundation for a sustainable future, for sustainable communities that benefit people, all living organisms, and the planet. So this sustainability framework we apply to our curriculum resources as a way to assess impacts of products or activities or actions that we're going to take, and allow students to think critically about evaluating if it will truly allow people in the future to have the same opportunities that we do here today. So if you didn't already know, you are living in the UN Decade of Education for Sustainable Development, which began in 2005 and ends in 2014. And most countries around the world have partner organizations for this. So in the U.S., for example, it's called the U.S. Partnership. And they have come up with a set of 3 Education for Sustainability K-12 learning standards. And I share these standards not to say that they're the gold standard by which education for sustainability should be evaluated, but I think they are a terrific starting point and a great reference for just reflecting on what it is we really are asking ourselves as educators to do when we talk about sustainability education, and what we're looking for our students to be doing. And the one I want to just call your attention to is that last one there, of developing what they call a multidisciplinary approach to learning the knowledge, skills, and attitudes necessary to continuously improve the health and well-being of present and future generations via both personal and collective decisions and actions. So that's a pretty lofty goal, But I think it's important to note that we're talking about not only knowledge and skills, but also attitude. So there's kind of three components there, and as a lot of us are familiar with in the K-12 arena, knowledge and skills are more and more frequently assessed, and attitudes in some ways are harder to assess, but sometimes maybe the more longer-lasting pieces that our students take with them. And I think it's one of the exciting pieces about our curriculum is that I feel it does a really nice job, and I think sustainability education in general does a really great job of supporting students in not only developing that academic skill, that content knowledge, but also really thinking about their attitudes and understanding how their attitudes are shaped by who they are, where they live, and how those impact their worldview and their actions in the world, and thinking about how they can actually take action on something that's important to them. And so you can download these at the U.S. Partnership website, just uspartnership.org, and there's a whole list of other resources there as well. There is also the companion, or I should say the similar Canadian organization, Learning for a Sustainable Future. And at the end of the webinar slides here, there's a link to that also. So we're talking about literacy and sustainability in social studies. I want to start off with talking about it in the primary grades. So you might be thinking, what I'm looking at here is, I see what look like children's books, so there's the literacy piece, but what's the link to sustainability and social studies? And to answer that, I want to first just briefly talk about what we mean by literacy, and then apply that to social studies and sustainability. So by literacy, we mean in the bigger sense the ability, to create and or use written information in all of its forms, be written, visual, you name the different ways that we need to be literate in the 21st century. And so we're tying in visual and media literacy as well. And with the increasing emphasis on literacy, we believe that social studies and the lens of sustainability offer an engaging opportunity for students to take action in their world and understand global issues in their world. And I think the idea of these 21st century literacies, I'm always kind of struck by what that looks like. And for example, the National Council of Teachers of English lists what they consider 21st century literacies, among them being managing, analyzing, and synthesizing multiple streams of simultaneous information, which to me just almost sounds daunting in thinking about that. And then it goes on to talk about creating, critiquing, and analyzing and evaluating multimedia texts and attending to ethical responsibilities required by these complex environments. And that all sounds, yes, very 21st century, and at the same time I think it's easy to get caught up and forget that in some ways humans have always been asked to analyze multiple streams of information. It just may have been that we weren't being bombarded by them at the same time. So to get that back in the framework of what we're talking about here today, I'm going to be sharing this in the context of two curriculum resources that Face in the Future has that educators can download for free from our website. They're drawn from larger teachers' guides, which you can learn more about on our website as well. So the first one is a lesson that uses these two books, Map of Myself and Fish is Fish, which are readily available trade books. And I'm not trying to endorse them in particular, but they were great books that we found that educators could easily get their hands on and use to introduce this lesson, which is, the lesson is called Map of Myself. And the idea behind this lesson is kind of introducing students to this idea of systems. And so thinking about, just as natural species biodiversity plays a role in nature, our unique identities as humans contribute to the diversity within human culture. And the extent to which people can recognize and cherish these diverse identities, it's an important factor in the health of human communities. So getting back to that sustainability piece there, the societal aspect, and the concept of mapping or our personal or cultural identity is introduced in using Sarah Finelli's My Map book. And so as part of this lesson activity, students brainstorm their own ideas of what their personal and cultural identity is, and they produce a poster that kind of maps a la the My Map book maps their identity. And then as a kind of a culminating feature of this first part, students do a gallery walk where they're looking to see for things that they have in common or that are different or that surprise them or that they don't understand about their fellow classmates' own pieces of their map of themselves. And then it also uses that Leo Leone story, Fish is Fish, to emphasize the importance of not only maintaining one's own identity as separate from, but still connected to the identities of others. And the lesson also, as with all the lessons in this teacher's guide, use not only children's literature and artwork, but also music as well. So there's a song at the end called So Much the Same, which last I checked you can also download from iTunes. It's by Judy and David Gershon. So on the screen in front of you there, you can see the outline of what the lesson looks like. And part of the activity involves students understanding what identity and culture are, with identity being the special qualities that make us different, and culture being the behaviors, beliefs, and arts and products, the things of a community or group of people. And we're talking about systems without using the word systems, and we're laying the foundation for understanding that anything sustainable is so because it's part of a balanced or considered system. And I think just as I mentioned, biodiversity is important to the overall natural world on planet Earth. So is the diversity and cultural identity of humans, and that these are starting with the self, the me of the primary grades. This is how we help students get ready for understanding systems without necessarily using the word systems. But so with kind of later developmental stages, they're ready to tackle the more complex notions of what systems thinking is. So there you can see just a snapshot of one of the maps from Sarah Fanelli's book. And so this is one example of what these maps can look like. And this is a map of my heart, and it's the basis for the lesson that follows on. On the next slide, you'll see a guide to help students kind of brainstorm and think through their map, and you'll see what that looks like here. And so this is really only a starting point. It's not that you have to use this, but it's a way to help students kind of get their thinking on paper and think through what a graphic representation might be. The book itself is great because it has, I think, about 12 different examples of different things you can map, from the kind of traditional map of a neighborhood to the more abstract that you just saw, kind of map of myself, to something like the map of my day. And so it's a great way. We've had a lot of positive feedback from teachers who have done this lesson, especially in the beginning of the year with their students, as a way of not only having students kind of get familiar with who they are in terms of relationships to their peers, but also with that gallery walk aspect of developing classroom community and being able to talk about the ideas of culture and identity, which are often so diverse in our classrooms, and having a safe way for students to share about that and compare and contrast and the differences and similarities between them and their peers. And so we're doing kind of laying the foundation for this advanced thinking without necessarily them knowing it in the first place. Which isn't to say that we're trying to be sneaky about it, but just recognizing the developmental stages of where students are at in primary grades are not necessarily ready to talk about systems thinking in ways that they might be in middle school. So that's the resource that's drawn from, and again, you can download that first lesson from our website for free. So we're looking in this teacher's guide, teaching students about real world issues and sustainable solutions. However, we've also want to recognize that we often shelter younger students from challenging issues like poverty or environmental degradation, because as an adult I struggle with that issue myself personally. It's how do I deal with that? How do I react to that? And so by framing these issues as opportunities to make a positive difference, and using a supportive medium like children's literature to make it possible to introduce younger learners to real world problems, we think that you can find age-appropriate ideas from involving students and solutions at the end of the lessons. And so as I said, they're really designed with the developmental needs of primary grade students in mind. So students are working collaboratively. They're getting experience with thinking critically and understanding different viewpoints, and practicing literacy skills and demonstrating them, not only in the classic written form, but also visually as well. And then to learn about ways that they can be engaged in as active members of their community. And so they draw upon their personal experiences and interests, and then we attempt to, through kind of extended projects, if you have the time and interest to do that, to connect them with their communities outside the school and their neighborhood. And one of the organizations listed at the resource page at the back, the Community Works Institute, they not only have a terrific online journal and online community around these topics, but they also, if you're interested in or close by, have great support for service learning at professional development institutes that they do in Vermont and California, and they have a terrific service learning and sustainability kind of curriculum connection manual that you can reference from their site as well. So that's on our reference page as well. One other piece I want to share for folks for whom this is important, if you're teaching in the U.S., every state has a different set of educational standards. That's changing somewhat now with the Common Core state standards. But if you're looking to find out how our educational materials correlate to the standards in the particular state that you're teaching in, we have an online tool that you can use to look up either vis-a-vis the title of the resource that you're teaching, or just you can search by state, grade, and subject, and it'll pull up the materials that we have that correlate to those particular parameters. So it's been a popular piece from what we've gathered from feedback from teachers, and just wanted to let folks know that that's available for all of our curriculum resources. So shifting gears, and to talk about things in the kind of the upper grades, so anything middle school, high school more so. So in the elementary grades, I briefly shared about how we're setting the stage for students understanding systems and sustainability, and then beginning in middle school, students are really ready to take on the work of thinking about the interconnections, the stocks and flows, if you will, of systems and sustainability. And at the same time, though, we know that, for example, in the U.S., 25% of students in grade 4 and above read below grade level, and with 21st century literacy demands, it's critical that the content and the context that we use for developing the classic or the 21st century literacy skills be engaging, especially with the growing realization of the emphasis on nonfiction material. So we thought, hey, education for sustainability is a great fit and a great way to support and teach interdisciplinarily social studies and literacy, because it often is a great way for if you're a social studies teacher to have that literacy component more explicitly taught and supported in your classroom, or if you're a literacy teacher looking to have different contexts, kind of more real-world basis, we felt like this was a great opportunity to create a resource to teach about that. So what I'm sharing with you here, again, is one of the lesson plans that can be downloaded from our website. It's from a broader teacher's guide and student book called Making Connections. And so it's one lesson from that. And in each of the lessons, we set out to do three things. So to teach a specific reading skill, in this case, identifying cause and effect in this particular lesson, and then practice a specific form of writing, so a persuasive essay in this case. And then to use sustainability, that economic, environmental, and societal interconnection, as a way to look at global issues. And we're doing this by asking essential questions, so things that students should be able to answer at the end of the lesson, and do this, vis-a-vis a culminating piece, both kind of written and/or a demonstration of learning through a more kind of actively engaged project at the end of each chapter. And also, we do this by outlining the content, the social studies, and education for sustainability parts, along with the language and the vocabulary, which is what you see here. So each lesson includes the language objectives, and these are objectives that you can pull from individually, so maybe you're looking to teach just to a couple of those, or that you want to teach to all of them. And the resource itself is kind of written that way as well. So it could be that you're looking to teach a specific reading skill or a specific form of writing, or talk about a specific issue, of a global issue, or through the lens of sustainability. And so there are 9 different lessons in this that you can pull from to do one or all of those features. So the lesson starts off in this case as an example, structured so you can pick and choose individual components. They're designed to be used for differentiated instructional levels, so it can be used with anyone from intermediate English language learners to a social studies teacher looking to bolster literacy instruction to a specialist working with striving first language readers. So there's lots of opportunities to do this. So this kind of kickoff kind of hook activity presents students with these 2 pairs of photos and asking them either on their own or to using these sentence starters to talk with somebody else about, what are they seeing here, and I wonder why, and I wonder how, as a way of kind of first engaging students with this idea of environmental issues and solutions. And then it moves on to kind of extend that thinking a little bit, but make it a little bit more personal, is to have, starting with where the students are at, and this prompt is meant to be, as a way to guide students into putting their thoughts and opinions in a concrete form, and also laying the foundation for writing a persuasive essay as a kind of culminating piece at the end of this lesson. And then as a way of kind of expanding use of the vocabulary, students can grapple with trying to figure out, just based on the pictures, what do we think these words mean. There are also some nice kind of options you can do with this, is, for example, looking at the derivatives with deforestation versus deforest and pollution as a derivative of polluting and pollutant, and looking at roots and prefixes and suffixes with the D in deforestation, and compound words like freshwater. So there are lots of different opportunities to use these global issues as language teaching opportunities. And then moving on to a different form of literacy skill development, there's a dialogue portion where students are given this graph of world freshwater per person, and then asked to think about choosing the correct word in an A-B dialogue, doing kind of a fill in the blank as they read through with their partners. And the reading itself steps through talking about what might be some reasons that there is less fresh water per person over time, and kind of extrapolating out to what that means for the future based upon what we might know about human population and resource use. And then moving on to more of the other literacy skill here is having students practice with understanding what signal words are to show causal relationships and looking at what cause and effect is in a piece of writing. So there's some examples there, and then students use their own blank version of this as they read through a set of 3 readings which are drawn from actual real-life people and about climate change and deforestation and freshwater scarcity. So the student book has 3 readings. The one there is on the first person on the left is Ben Namakin. He lives in Micronesia in the Southwest Pacific, talking about climate change and what that means for his country with rising seawater. The middle person there is Nellie Chaposky, who is a farmer in western Kenya, and talking about what she's seeing with the implications for deforestation in her community. And the gentleman on the right there is Gung Kui Lai, who lives in western China, and talking about what they're seeing with the increasing freshwater scarcity in that region. And so you could do this as a jigsaw activity, for example, of dividing the class up into groups of, say, 6, and have students get into pairs and to read about one of the issues and then share the main idea from the reading to the larger group, and then to give students a minute to kind of preview the activity and think about the title, and then to ask these questions before they read, to think about what do you think the reading is going to be about based on the title and the pictures and the subheadings, and then what are your reactions to the photos as a way of kind of setting up what this lesson is going to be about. And then ask students to think about if they can identify the cause and effect and pinpoint those signal words in each reading, and then have students actually go through and read it, and then ask them to complete the graphic organizer that comes along with it to practice cause and effect. So the culminating activity for this is having students write a persuasive essay. There's that one prompt that's included in the text, but it's not necessarily the one that you have to use. You could use any other prompt that is maybe more on the minds in your community or your students. But we figured we'd pick something, at least relatively speaking, that's top of mind and perhaps a little controversial in some places. As an example, students are given a sample essay about plastic bags to have them get a sense of what a persuasive essay looks like, and they're given for example, this editing checklist and rubrics for them to evaluate their own work on their own and or with a peer educator. And so students can create these. There are other resources listed in the teacher's guide for students to go to get more information, as well as additional resources on our website about the particular topic of climate change. So this is one kind of culminating piece for students to demonstrate their knowledge. The other part, though, that we try and include is a different kind of activity, so a different, I would say more physically involved way of students to demonstrate their knowledge. So this can be done in a couple different ways. The activity is called Watch Where You Step, and it's ideally introducing students to the idea of ecological footprint. The lesson comes with a set of kind of pre-made worksheets that you can have where students kind of think about a particular product and step back through its life cycle and think about what went into making the buttons or the cotton cloth or the zipper. So what kind of resources and materials and processes were required to do that. And then, so you could kind of leave it at there, or you could go a little bit more in depth if you have the time, and to really do a study of what ecological footprint is, and looking at how much land and sea does each of us need to provide the goods and services that we need to support our lifestyle. And the activity provides the support to do that if you want to. and to have students think about, creating some kind of a bigger diagram for a particular item, looking at, again, all the resources and processes involved in creating it, and then also thinking about, how could I, reduce the ecological footprint or make this item more sustainable, for example. So this is the resource that it's drawn from, Making Connections. And again, you can download that lesson number 3 from our website. So we created this with a couple things in mind, kind of as I talked about before I introduced the lesson, but the idea of it could be used in multiple contexts. So the idea of language acquisition with English language learners or striving readers, or teaching reading comprehension of nonfiction materials, or just looking at talking about global issues and sustainability in a social studies course, and overall, though, having some more student engagement around current issues, which is not to bash or belittle other literacy support texts out there, but I do think this is a different framework for approaching these, and something that offers students a way to be involved in thinking about global issues and relating to their own communities in ways that I think other resources sometimes don't do. And so why combine these two, which is kind of what we've been talking about here all along, is really because it's a way of making language learning purposeful. We might think it's kind of preaching to the converted, perhaps, especially those of us who are tuned in here, but to think for a moment about what it is that makes sustainability an engaging lens and what makes global issues engaging topics is they can be used to encourage and support literacy development. Since a lot of us are, in some ways probably involved in the social studies, we already know that there are certain subjects or issues or maybe periods of history that we find, more personally engaging to teach. And that's the same way for our students too. And so hopefully this will provide one more opportunity to engage students that might not otherwise be as interested or engaged in the other materials or topics that you have at hand in your current curriculum. So, we think these issues like climate change to conflict or quality of life and water quality, issues like these, they're current, they're in the news, and for many of our students, they're engaged when they're given the opportunity to delve into them. And so when you think about, from the flooding of Tropical Storm Sandy just last week to the devastating floods in Pakistan a couple years ago, it's an opportunity to have students relate issues across time and space, and for better and for worse to their own communities as well, depending upon what the impact might be. And I think that presents an opportunity to then also delve into let's learn about how to write something that's meaningful for our community and to share that with them beyond the walls of our school. So I'm going to kind of bring things to a close here, and hopefully I'm still on time. Tim, it looks like I am. This is just a short list of resources that I wanted to share with folks. These are on our website as well, so you can click on these links here. But just a couple of those. So Learning for a Sustainable Future is the Canadian partner organization for the UN Decade for Education for Sustainable Development. And it's a great resource, especially if you look at that one compared to the U.S. partnership website. They're very different websites, and I think are kind of nice companion pieces because they approach the resource support in different ways. Taking IT Global is another great Canadian organization, which if you're looking to connect your students to other students or connect with other teachers, I can't say enough about the work that they do. And it's a great way to have your students connected and get connected as well across the world. And of course, Green Teacher Magazine, another great resource that we would not be here were it not for, and I misspelled magazine. That's embarrassing. Community Works Journal I mentioned before, and the Journal of Sustainability Education, if you're looking for kind of more specific reading, slightly more, I would say, academic about sustainability education, it's a great place to go. They have, I think, at least 3. They do a couple of one big issue every year. Curriculum 21, their clearinghouse, is another great place to go if you're looking just for resources around teaching the 21st century. They have everything from resources about sustainability to how do I use an iPad in my classroom. So it's a great place to go for a whole host of resources. And then, of course, us, Facing the Future at facingthefuture.org. That's my email down there. I'm just Dave at facingthefuture.org. So if you have questions, would like to get a copy of the slides, or kind of confounded about how to download these lesson plans that I was talking about, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. And just briefly, I want to share with you, if you're interested in our resources, we're going to be coming out with a textbook and teacher's guide for teaching global sustainability. It's a whole course, so it's our first non-supplemental kind kind of complete course package that looks at global issues through the lens of sustainability, and that'll be out next spring. And just briefly, those are the kind of 4 big pieces it looks at of the ecological footprint and human health and security and the global economy, and closing with what does it take to make a sustainable community. And then lastly, that's how you can stay connected with us. All of our various places that you will find us online and social media, and again, my contact information is just dave@facingthefuture.org. So, Tim, thank you again for the opportunity, and for those of you who tuned in live, thanks for coming in and for sharing what you're doing. And for those of you who are listening later, by all means, feel free to get in touch, and thanks for listening and hopefully sharing with somebody else. So I will leave you all with that thought from Buckminster Fuller, and if anybody else does have questions, Tim and I are here to try and answer them if we can.
Thanks, David. And if you can move us then to the question slide, the next slide.
Oh, yes. There we go.
And thanks again. That was a really, as expected, a rich and wonderful presentation. Much appreciated. Folks, as I mentioned earlier, for those of you who've just come in who didn't hear the introduction, this is a chance now for you, as apropos to the slide you see on the screen, to type in a question into that horizontal box at the top and press submit, and that will propel it into a back office, which I will be going back and forth from for the next 30 minutes, and passing on verbally the questions to Dave. And you can also, if you have any trouble with that by any chance, don't hesitate to also type a question into the chat box in the bottom left-hand corner. So either way, we'll take your questions over the next couple of minutes. And while you're typing those, and if you have 2 questions, type one at a time, hit submit, and then you'll get a blank screen again, at which point you can type in that second question. And while you're doing that, just a couple of questions and comments, Dave. I thought that was a kind of a chilling slide you put up, with a photo actually of that huge surge hitting that town. I think that was a pretty timely slide, given what happened on the East Coast with Hurricane Sandy. I also was going to mention, I was glad you mentioned Community Works and their service learning institutes that they do on the West Coast. They used to be based in Vermont, and they still do an institute every summer at Shelburne Farms, just south of Burlington, Vermont. So there's opportunities on both coasts for people to take in their sessions. So.
Yeah, no, thanks for mentioning that. I'd forgotten. Yeah, they actually started out there, and they've just recently expanded to the West Coast. So yeah, it's great to hear that's going on.
I have a quick question, David. In the very first activity, the map of myself, I think you subsequently said that was from a kind of a K-4 curriculum. That particular lesson, what kind of grade level or age level would that be appropriate?
You know, because of the kind of artistic nature of it, if you can support students in thinking through the kind of brainstorming sheet there, I think it's been used successfully in almost all the grades. Ideally, it's probably going to be easier for students to do in grade 2 and above, I think. But the artistic part and the kind of gallery walk afterwards, I think, lends itself pretty nicely to almost any age range of students. And even when I do this activity with adults, it's a fun one to do, just to see the different ways people choose to share something about who they are. I've seen people adults do a map of my responsibilities, which includes anything from picking my kids up at school to taking care of one of their parents, to one woman who did a map of her life mistakes, which was a really kind of heartfelt and poignant way of looking at. I think the one from her childhood was somehow gluing glitter on the floor and ruining the carpet. To in high school, she was talking about some poor dating decisions she'd made. And I can't remember what her adult one was, but she was, really insistent that she was going to take this back and share it with her students. And it was, all of us in the room at the conference were just, amazed that this was this very, really powerful demonstration of who she was.
Yeah, I think it's a fabulous. What I liked actually about all of the activities that you introduced were how open-ended they were, and open-ended ones really, I think there's no better style of or type of activity that promotes literacy because it so readily connects. Kids can connect to it in their own experience and leap into it. It's not based on some tests of knowledge that might intimidate people. They're incredibly invitational kinds of activities. So I was really enjoying your introduction of each one of them.
No, thanks. That's one of the things that we're fortunate that the folks here who write our curriculum, which I can take no credit for actually writing it, but yeah, is that I think that open-ended nature, which in some ways is kind of daunting, I think, as a classroom teacher, because it's also the open-ended piece increasingly, I think, is more difficult to maybe assess in ways that classroom teachers are asked to assess work nowadays. But I think we firmly believe that these open-ended opportunities, while not appropriate for all content or all skills, are great ways for students to use them in real-world context, to see what it's like to think critically about who I am and to contrast that with who my fellow students are, and to do that in a way that's safe also.
No, that sounds great. Our first question has come in, which is, do you have any good sources for project-based curriculum that is based on sustainability as well, and could be used across the high school level, dealing with topics like alternative energy, climate change, etc.?
Well, I'll certainly be biased and say, I think that we have some great resources, especially that we have some free curriculum units dealing with climate change, or another one called Bayou's Toss that can be used with or without the online movie Story of Stuff. And project-based can mean some very specific things if you're using perhaps like the definition of in the U.S., the Buck Institute has done some great work and created a whole manual about project-based learning. Or if you're on Edutopia, one of their staff members, I think, has a blog on Edutopia still. So there's that kind of specific example of what project-based learning should look like in that way, or you can kind of expand it to including service learning in that overall definition, albeit there are some different goals to project-based learning versus service learning, actual serving a community need. If you're in the kind of northwest corner of the U.S., I would say Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, there is an amazing project that students can be involved in called Imagine Tomorrow, which is looking at kind of sustainable design overall, anything from biofuels to I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank what the other ones are, but they're great opportunities for students to be involved in serious project-based learning, really kind of in the fields of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, but looking at applying academic content and skills to solving a real problem. We've been fortunate to be invited to create a biofuels curriculum that can be used alongside the Imagine Tomorrow competition, which is what it is. The competition, students do these projects. They go to Washington State University in Pullman in May, and there's a competition where they present their work, much like a business proposal in some ways, and people from industry, from academia, from education evaluate their projects based on interviews and talking with students. So that's a more specific way of doing it, and even if you're not in that area, I would encourage folks to look at the Imagine Tomorrow project at their website to see what students are doing and what's happening there. And beyond that, I would say if you have more specific questions about what to do with project-based learning with your students, do please get in touch with me offline. I'd be happy to learn more about what specifically this person's trying to do and maybe direct them in the right place.
Thanks, Dave. As usual, a great and complete answer. I will, if folks have other questions, feel free to type them into that horizontal box. We have a fairly small group here, so we're certainly going to get all the questions answered. And you can also make comments in the chat box as well, or if there's a particular reference you're looking for. And speaking of references, I should mention that tomorrow we will send out a list of all the references and Dave's contact information to everyone who registered for the webinar this evening, and so you don't need to scribble those things down, or if you missed having a chance to write down some of them, not to worry, you'll get those. We'll send them to you by midday tomorrow. So, but that's great. Let me just see if there's any more questions here.
All right.
And there is. I'm trying to. I'm having a little trouble grabbing this question. Just see if I can fix this problem. Yeah, the question here is a very thoughtful comment and question. He said, this person says, I'm not sure if it's male or female, said, I may have missed the very beginning where you were talking about reading as a part of literacy, but I attended, says this person, a program recently by Hedrick Smith, who's an author and journalist, and I'm not familiar with that name. Hedrick mentioned that he and his wife read books by reading aloud to each other, and as this person quite rightly mentions, we often think of only reading to children, but I thought this was a great example of using literacy as a... Any comments, Dave?
The last bit of your part got cut off there, Tim. I don't know if
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
just saying. The person is just saying that, and I'll go back a little bit. Hedrick was pointing out that he and his wife read books to each other by reading aloud. And while we often think of reading to children, this was a great example of using literacy as adults. Any thoughts on kind of reading aloud?
Well, it's one of the pieces that I know we've intentionally incorporated into that other resource that I shared, the Making Connections, with that second lesson of based on the research that folks did here, was that reading aloud is for students definitely a powerful way of practicing literacy, because we often are just asked to read silently, and it's interesting that you mentioned the reading aloud thing. I remember a while ago, my wife and I were traveling, and we only had one book between the two of us, and both of us wanted to read it, and we read the book aloud to each other in the moments when we had. And I think, just like Hedrick Smith talked about, it's refreshingly invigorating to have somebody else read you a story, or to have to read a story to somebody else, because it really does change how you read it. You have to think more, I think, about what you're reading when you read aloud to someone else. So I'm going to have to go find out more about Hedrick Smith, I think.
Me too. Thank you very much. We don't have any other questions here, so I'm going to suggest that we go to the questionnaire in just a moment. I did fail to mention two things earlier. One was that if any of you who are participating in this webinar and need a certificate of participation, you can send an email to me, to either any of the Green Teacher address. I'm tim@greenteacher.com, and we'll get that to you by early next week. Happy to do that. And if you're attending, we have a webinar in each of the next 2 weeks. If you're attending either of those, perhaps wait, and you would like a certificate for either of those, just wait, and we'll ask us for all 2 or 3 of the next webinars that you've attended. Ask for a certificate that reflects your participation in those 2 or more webinars. So Dave, if you would hit the questionnaire, then bring that up. We'll put that in front, and if people have more questions, they can ask it in the chat box. We're still happy to take it.
Okay, so I just hit the next arrow there. I know I need to pull up.
Yep, where it's default content folder, and then questionnaires slide number 2.
There we go.
And you'll click on that. Great. And as I mentioned earlier, folks, this is a short, very short 5-question questionnaire, but only 2 of them ask you to do something other than choose a multiple choice answer. And if you take a moment, we'd be very appreciative. And at the end of those 5 questions, you can hit submit, and that will propel it into the back office and help us with subsequent presentations as well as the line. And while they're doing that, Dave, again, thanks for a fabulous presentation. This was a really rich treat, and can't thank you enough for doing this.
Well, Tim, you're too kind to say that. I appreciate you inviting me back, and really just thanks to you and then your small staff at Green Teacher. I think the platform that you've created here for sharing this. I was looking back at all the other people you've had on. It's an amazing list of people with subjects that I probably would not have considered had they not been mentioned in your webinar topic. So my hat is off to you all for creating this, and I hope we can do it again perhaps next year at this time.
Absolutely. It'd be well, you're the first person we've invited back for a second time, and it may well be you'll do a third one before we have other meets. And but given this evening's presentation, that's no stretch at all. So again, thanks everybody for joining us this evening or this afternoon, wherever you live. I hope we'll see you again at another webinar, and really appreciate you taking the time to join us. We had a fairly small crowd and had a few questions than we normally do, but I think it's you may or may not agree, but I thought it was and I'm sorry, by the way, for Lee Jenkins. If you go, there should be a submit button at the bottom of the screen. When you scroll down to the last question, use that bar on the right-hand side of the slide and scroll down. You should get to question 5 and 6, which you wouldn't initially be able to see, and then there should be a submit button there. And if you can't, and I see Lee is still having trouble with that, maybe others are too, I should also just mention, Lee, that when we send out the email tomorrow with the follow-up information and some of the references Dave referred to in his email, we'll offer you a link to the same survey via Eventbrite. So apologies that it's not working for you this evening. And if you would take a moment after you get the email from us tomorrow to fill in the survey again, we'd be very, very appreciative. So, and we'll leave this up on the screen for a couple of minutes. But again, thank you, David, for taking the time. Really appreciate it. It was also a real delight to finally meet you face to face in Oakland, California, at the North American Association for Environmental Ed Conference. That was fun.
Yeah, that's one of those strange 21st century things where we know people for years and never see them in person anymore. So yeah, that was great. I'm glad you tracked us down and introduced yourself. That was fun.
Absolutely, and no, it's the strength of that particular conference that draws me there every year. It's just a fabulous opportunity to connect with people from all over the U.S. and Canada and often beyond. And the other big conference that we're getting to, and some of your staff have attended in the past, is the new one, which is the Green Schools Conference, the National Green Schools Conference, which this year is in February in Palm Beach, Florida. West Palm Beach,
yeah.
That's right. Or no, maybe it's not West Palm Beach, it's just Palm Beach. But in any case, and another rich opportunity to connect with people, like-minded people from really around the continent. So it's,
we'll see you there.
I hope. Oh, fantastic! That's great. That's excellent. And never a hardship to twist the arms of people in Seattle, Washington, or Toronto, Ontario, Canada, to have to go down to Florida in February conference. That was a clever move. And anyway. Yeah. So again, thanks everybody for joining us this evening. We'll leave this slide up still for another minute or so. Dave, actually, if you could hit the archive button, we'll close the session. We can all still chat and so forth.
Okay.